Many of you here in the room participated in various stages of their research and development in their prototyping. And what we're going to see today is the culmination or capstone really of their program and all of the recommendations that they're making to us based on feedback that you all provided. So I couldn't be happier to see all of you here and to be able to turn the floor over to Jessica. Now, before I do that, I just want to say I'm a little bit of a plug for SMU. These universities, SMU and others that we work with, do have programs available where they are essentially for hire. And I know some of you got an invitation for me, and you might be thinking, you know what, I have challenges in my team as well. As you look and hear from these students today, this is the caliber of thinking that we can get and working with some of our local colleges and such. So I wanted to put that plug out there. They're open for business. Each semester, many of these schools invite companies like ours to work with them, and it gives the students real world opportunities, great networking, and it gives us fresh ideas. So a little bit of a plug, and I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, the director of the program.
Thank you so much, Jody. So like Jody said, I'm Jessica Burnham, Director of Masters of Arts in Design and Innovation. I'm so excited to be here. We're so thankful for all of you to participate and all of the help that we've gotten throughout the semester. So I wanted to kind of give an overview of what you can expect to see today. The big overarching goal and what we're always working on is how are we really believe that design and innovation should be at any table. And so that means we're working on projects. That means we're kind of in spaces that we might not be familiar with, but we're going to run through our process to get to something really interesting. And so our big overview is, of course, we're with the DFW Airport here. And our project was how might we unlock the power of innovation? And so we had some kind of baselines that we were rolling off of that Jody and her team had launched this innovation mindset training that got 100% compliance. And so we could say, what do we do from there? How can we kind of land on that or keep going from that? There's been a lot of organizational change in the last couple months. So how can our students kind of be mindful of that and sensitive to all of that? And then adjusting to COVID restrictions. There's a lot of how are we engaging with people, COVID's still happening, and how are we adjusting and being agile and all of that? And then mindful of future plans and scalability. So one thing, if the students are saying, well, we could start a whole thing, a whole program. We're quick to say, how are you going to do that? Who's going to do that? Where are you going to go? And so we have 3 teams that have been split up between the class. And again, we start from this same spot of how might we unlock the power of innovation at DFW Airport. Jody and I actually got to bring that question to life. So we planned that question over the summer and then launched together from that at the beginning. But then you'll quickly see that each group very quickly diverged into their own plans. And a lot of that is because they're all made up of very diverse backgrounds and we really lean into the fact that as design researchers, you're bringing your full self to each project. So you'll learn more from each team in that. And then I wanted to just quickly say, what to expect is that as the students are designing and really trying to understand the context they're working in, they'll quickly say, okay, I think what we need to do is build XYZ, whatever it is. And so with their kind of hypothesis based in this evidence of research, then they'll land on something to say, this is what's going to happen next. And so just to assume that it will work is not enough for us. So we test and make it and prototype it. And so what you'll see today is things that they actually put into the world and then we responded to. So it's not just we have lots of great ideas. It's no, we have great ideas and we launched it. And so then we'll be able to come back and talk about it and tell about it and address how this could kind of keep going. So with that, I think we're ready to get started. Anything else? Okay, we'll have the first group go. Sorry, there's always other things. We'll have the first group go, and then we'll have time for Q&A after each group. And then at the very end, we'll bring all the groups back up for any other general questions for the whole group. Okay, so we'll get started.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Can you guys hear me okay? Is my mic on? Yes, okay. Another check? Oh, maybe it just needs to go up higher. Okay, awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We're a team free to move about. Oh, Jessica, I need the clicker. I was like, I can't move it. Awesome. So we're Team Free to Move About. We go by FTMA for short. And the reason why we chose this team name is obviously leaning into the fact that it's a common airline phrase, but also we felt like it really embodied what we do as a human-centered design team. We really do kind of freely move about our client organization to learn as much as we possibly can in order to design the best solution. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our team.
Hi, I'm Hope Anderson. I'm an outreach coordinator at SMU.
I'm JT Ringer, and I am the prop supervisor at SMU.
And I'm Casey McCartan, and I'm currently an IT project manager at Accenture. So like Jessica said, our question was, how might we unlock the power of innovation within the DFW Airport employees? And what really drove our research was how we defined this question. So this idea of unlocking the power, this use of active language made us realize that maybe we just needed to find the potential of something that already existed rather than creating something from scratch. Also, with the definition of innovation, we leaned into the definition that you all are very familiar with, which is something new and something useful, just so to ensure that we are using the same language that's used here at DFW Airport. And finally, when defining the DFW Airport employees, we were defining both the corporate employees that work here in headquarters and in other office buildings, as well as the frontline employees. So we wanted to make sure that we were designing a solution that fit the needs for both the folks here in this building and also, for example, a police officer who may be in every single terminal in just one shift. So once we defined the question, we then had to ask ourselves, what does it even mean to be an innovative organization? What traits do innovative organizations have that others may not? So once we read a lot of literature and talked to some experts, we kind of started seeing some common traits like psychological safety, applied learning, growth mindsets, tolerance for failure, and working in interdisciplinary teams. And what the research was saying was that if both the organization and the employees embrace these traits, then it really paves the way to build an innovative company culture. So then we asked ourselves, okay, we know what to look for, but how does an organization actually build this runway for innovation? How do you actually get the employees and the organization to actually shift mindsets to embrace these traits? So we looked into some common practices for organizational change. Changing an organization is hard. Changing a company culture is hard. But we found a McKinsey study that talked through these 4 pillars here. And what the study said was that if a company can embrace all 4 pillars and focuses on all 4 pillars, then the change to the organization can be successful. So what we decided to do was to lean into each of these 4 pillars in the context of DFW Airport and innovation, just to see if there is an area of opportunity. So the first pillar is a purpose to believe in. So I think we've heard a lot, DFW Airport to become more innovative. We're even hearing it from when Sean Donahue showed up to a Wisdom Wednesday meeting back in May. We heard it in a lot of our interviews. People are understanding that this is becoming a really big purpose for DFW Airport. Skills required for change, like Jessica said, we know all of you have completed the innovation mindsets training, 100% of all employees, which means that there's a common language and skill set that now all of the employees have around innovation. Regarding consistent role models, the innovation team was kind of founded to do that, to really be the face for this change, and really brought in a lot of the business units to help them on projects and to kind of teach the different business units about innovation. This last pillar is reinforcement systems. And this is where our team really paused and kind of thought, what reinforcement systems are currently at DFW Airport to support innovation. And this is where we kind of struggled. We knew there was a DFW Airport innovation process. We knew that there's additional trainings like the boot camp, but we really wanted to design an active solution, something that really engaged all of the employees. And when we spoke to Dr. Ann Battenberg, who's actually SMU's expert in positive psychology and growth mindsets, she talked to this idea of that policies and systems need to also change in order to support the purpose that you're trying to change your organization to. So this was the idea that we really wanted to lean into for the rest of our research. I think now it's off. You can take JT's.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, exciting stuff. I'm also good at projecting, so we will do well. We needed to hear from the experts, so we dove deep into interviews. Over the course of 12 weeks, we interviewed 4 academic experts in fields like psychology and behavioral economics, 4 industry experts in fields like innovation and design. And most importantly, we spoke with you all, the women and the men of DFW Airport. We conducted 18 interviews with employees ranging across all levels and across 10 divisions. Some of y'all identified as frontline workers, many as corporate leaders, and together we guided us forward. We wanted to understand your experiences with innovation, what opportunities exist within your teams, and what roadblocks kept innovation from taking off. Based upon these employee interviews, we came across 3 core themes: storytelling, activation, and connection. So our first theme is storytelling. A shared desire for testimonials and innovation success stories was consistent across employee interviews. People want to see the wins. As Jason from the innovation team reminded us, it's so important to make sure these messages get out there about how it benefited the organization clearly. Employees care about the what's happening and great about innovation at DFW, but also the why. How and why would these changes show up in their teams? Our second theme is activation. We found that many employees embrace this culture of innovation, this emerging movement within your organization, but needed some additional resources to bridge the gap from knowledge and implementation. We examined the Innovation Bootcamp participant survey data to look at these 2 questions in particular. 1, what additional development topics would you like to see offered? And what areas would you like to have been covered in more depth through these trainings? 40% of the responses to these 2 questions reference things like interviewing, pitching, or prototyping. So our data made us wonder how we might design a reinforcement system that allowed for deeper activation of the wonderful trainings that are already present. And our final theme is connection. When we spoke with Dr. Battenberg about psychological safety and other prerequisites for innovation, she emphasized the power of trust. We build trust through consistent positive connection, right? And from the project's very beginning, Jody had told us that cross-functional engagement would be critical to success. The truth is that employees also believe this, and we're looking for opportunities to build more positive connections across teams. So at this point, we understood that a reinforcement system would need to address these 3 core areas. And we hypothesized that if we can design a reinforcement system that allows DFW Airport employees to tell stories about innovation, to activate their innovation trainings, and to connect across business units, then we can amplify innovation culture at DFW Airport. Circling back to this notion of unlocking the power, we looked for an active solution. So what if reinforcement systems weren't just sticky notes or optimistic posters on a wall? What if they were people? We searched around for other companies known for their innovation culture to see how they were designing these reinforcement systems and creatively leveraging people power. We spoke with James Helms, the VP of Design and Product at Intuit. He told us that much like DFW Airport, Intuit had also developed these company-wide innovation trainings, but needed an additional resource for folks to connect the dots between the trainings and their everyday work lives, right? So Intuit created the Innovation Catalyst program, in which they train employees who are passionate about innovation to then become facilitators and guides across teams. James told us that nobody gets innovation on the first try. Yes, it is difficult. These people will help you work out your idea. Later, as we explored this concept further with David Debchek from Giant Innovation, he told us that there's nothing particularly unique about this idea of facilitators or guides. What is unique is understanding their role within the company. In other words, these high potential cohorts bring proven value to an organization, but the real challenge would be designing an experience specific to y'all at DFW Airport. So we said, challenge accepted, introducing DFW's innovation ambassadors. So how does this program actually work? We're super glad you asked, and we've put together a little video. to introduce you to this really special community of innovation ambassadors.
Sam is a project manager in planning. She attends the Innovation Bootcamp and wants to do more with innovation. Sam signs up to be an innovation ambassador, attends the specialized trainings, and joins the Innovation Ambassador community. These ambassadors come from departments all over the company and from varying levels, ranging from new hires and frontline workers to VPs. Meanwhile, Javier in IT is working through a process flow problem and wishes he could automate a task. His colleague, Trey, encourages him to reach out to an innovation ambassador to help him come up with some potential solutions. Javier sends a request for an innovation ambassador. Sam sees the request and has time in her schedule, so she connects with Javier. Sam discusses the problem with him, helps him to partner with the testing team, and eventually, they find a way to automate elements of Javier's process, saving him nearly 3 hours a week.
Now, obviously, we wanted innovation ambassadors to become more than just stick figures, right? So we tested the idea through prototyping.
Great. So we had this innovation ambassador idea and it was time to prototype. We split our prototype into 2 phases. Phase 1 was a co-creation workshop with different DFW employees, and phase 2 simulated the innovation ambassador experience. So in phase 1, we recruited 10 innovation bootcamp graduates to do a co-creation session with us. And why did we use bootcamp graduates in particular? Well, we know that everybody has to take the innovation mindset training. Some people are excited by that and they move on to the bootcamp. And then ambassadors would most likely come from this pool of bootcamp graduates. So if our bootcamp graduates were not excited about our idea, then we knew that we didn't really arrive at the right solution. In this workshop, we were trying to gauge interest in the program in general and also kind of work out some of the details about how to make it specifically fit with DFW Airport. So we ran a 1-hour session over Zoom. We used Miro, a digital whiteboard space, to run through some questions. Here's an overview of some of the slides that we worked through. And I know you can't really read these in detail, so let's talk about some themes that emerged during that session. The first was structure. If ambassadors are to be successful, they'll need some kind of structure to rely on, whether that's a toolkit, a template, some kind of framework. But at the core, we're looking for tools and resources for these ambassadors. The next was connection. There was a real strong desire to connect people from different business units through these ambassadors. And then also ambassadors really do need a way to connect with each other, bounce ideas off of each other, maybe bring in other ambassadors from other business units onto a project. And then of course, colleagues who need an ambassador would really need a simple and straightforward way to reach out to an ambassador to get their help. The next theme that emerged was value. You know, if this program is going to be successful, there really needs to be documentation about why these ambassadors bring value to the organization. What are they doing? How have they helped their colleagues with their projects? You know, the ambassadors are essentially borrowing time from their normal work week. So we really need to justify why they have created value here. We knew that there would be some challenges rolling out the program, so we weren't surprised to hear that time might be a concern. You know, people already have a full-time job to do. They're already busy. So again, being realistic about how many hours per month an ambassador could dedicate to these kinds of projects would be really important. And then these last 2 themes of value and time really kind of tie into our last theme, which was support. You know, ambassadors are going to need support from leadership if they're going to be successful. One participant in our workshop said that they really wanted to normalize this ambassador work as part of their everyday role. This wasn't something extra that they were doing. And that really brought us back to our initial challenge of unlocking the power of innovation in the DFW employees. You know, it seems that employees are ready and excited to unlock innovation, and leadership really needs to help them turn that key. So once we finished the co-creation workshop, we asked participants to complete a short survey for us just to gather some additional data. Everybody who responded was excited to see this program at DFW, and 88% said that they would use an ambassador in the future. So that completed our phase 1 part of our prototype. We moved on to phase 2, which simulated the innovation ambassador experience. And to do that, we recruited Jason Williams, who during our semester working with your organization, Jason was in the process of moving from planning to the innovation team. So we asked him to be our ambassador because he had all of these years in planning, but also had an advanced knowledge of the innovation process. We paired Jason with Sheree Wheatley in concessions, who has sort of a terminal operations and corporate background. So we thought she could give us perspective from both of those sides. And we created, So, and based on our co-creation session, we made the following design decisions for that experience. Again, we heard that time might be an issue for a program like this. So we limited the interaction to just 1 hour. We wanted to see what Jason and Sheree could accomplish in 1 hour together. We, again, intentionally paired Jason with somebody outside of planning, outside of innovation, so we could get that cross-functional engagement. And then because structure came up as a need for this program, we did design a template for Jason and Sheree to walk through during their meeting. So outcomes from this meeting were time. 1 hour was sufficient for Jason and Sheree to get from a problem statement to some prototype ideas. Connection, they didn't have any problem, working through their problem statement, even though they were from different business units. And then structure, we're going to give this, or templates, we're going to give this a yes and. Yes, templates are helpful, and ambassadors should feel free to alter the templates as they go, customize it to the specific situation. Jason told us that he did make a few modifications to the template as he went, and that should be what an ambassador feels free to do.
Okay, so what does it look like to roll out an innovation ambassador program at DFW Airport? We leaned back into our 3 themes we talked about earlier. So activation, connection, and storytelling, and created some design principles that should hold true when rolling out a program like this. So first, innovation ambassadors activate the innovation learning process by giving employees the opportunity to use the innovation process. What we heard from a lot of the employees we talked to is they were excited that DFW Airport had an innovation process. They were excited to use it. It really allowed them to let their creativity out, whether it's within their day-to-day job or just outside of by engaging in other projects. What we also heard is that innovation ambassadors need to be a consistent resource for DFW Airport. And by that, the employees want to understand what to expect out of a meeting with an innovation ambassador. And in the same way, like what JT mentioned, innovation ambassadors also want consistent resources to help them while they're helping an employee. Next, innovation ambassadors connect employees across business units to solve problems. This idea of peer-to-peer learning was really exciting to a lot of the people that we talked to, a lot of the employees that we talked to. They felt like if they could see their peer really championing innovation and really embracing this idea, then it seemed more relatable, it seemed more attainable for them as well. Also, the connection between the innovation ambassador and the employees should be an organic ecosystem. Yes, this is a designed program. It would be a formalized program, but it should be, it should have the ability to adapt to the variety of, there's a big diverse population of employees here. So we want to make sure that it can adapt to those different needs, whether you're here at headquarters or out in the front line. Finally, innovation ambassadors must tell their stories of wins and learnings from innovation. More importantly, innovation ambassadors will need to learn how to measure the value that they bring to DFW Airport. This is one way to get additional buy-in from employees who just still aren't quite sure about this thing called innovation. Also, the wins and learnings that we're telling stories about should ideally be relatable to many of the employees. A win is great in and of itself, but if the win is a flying taxi, it's a little difficult for the average employee to then understand how innovation can help them. But if the win is, saving a couple hours on paperwork because of automation, most people can get behind that and can see how that can relate to their day-to-day job. So to wrap things up, we were asked, how might we unlock the power of innovation within DFW Airport employees? And like we've been saying throughout this presentation, unlock the power for us meant finding the potential of something that already exists. And what we found was this group of employees who already had the innovation mindset. They were excited to use the innovation process, and they even wanted to help their peers learn more about innovation. So how do we unlock this power? By leveraging this group of employees who are eager to innovate. DFW Airport can activate the innovation learning process, connect employees across business units, and tell stories about everyday innovation. So we called this group Innovation Ambassadors because we believe that they'll meet the DFW Airport everyday innovator where they're at in their innovation journey, and ultimately build the runway for innovation to take off at DFW Airport. So thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up for questions, and then we'll have questions for our friends on Zoom online. So if we have any questions, if you can speak loudly, then we'll have the students repeat them so they get them on the microphone. So anyone want to start for thoughts? Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. I can tell you what we learned from James Helms when we talked to, so he's from Intuit. What they do with the Innovation Catalyst is, yes, they are kind of on their own, but what they've done is they've really built a great network. So they're able to interact with each other, kind of learn from each other. But at the same time, there are conferences and trainings and meetings to kind of bring everyone back together, which also kind of helps foster that community.
On the Zoom, Sarah Wicker asked how the innovation ambassadors are chosen.
This is a good question. And it's one that we kept running into actually throughout our prototyping, especially through our co-design workshop. We wanted to know if these special folks should be nominated by their teams. Should they be, is it an invitation only thing, or you have to raise your hand? And what we kept hearing from employees is they want sort of a mixture of that. The ideal that was surfaced through our prototype experience was that the ideal would be sort of a nudge or a nomination by your boss, in the sense that you already have buy-in, your team is excited for you to step forward into that. But ideally, you yourself should want this. This is a passion area. As Casey shared, Intuit has a really great similar experience via their Catalyst. And what they found is that employees throughout the ranks, including frontline folks and people in corporate, would sign up for this because they want professional development. This is a way to increase their upward mobility in an org. So it should be passion-based and self-fueled, even as that extra nudge from your colleague or boss could be super helpful. Yeah.
I'm going to give you the microphone.
How does, I noticed that you said something earlier in your presentation about psychological safety, and I would imagine for innovation ambassadors to freely move about, that they would need that. What are some of the ways you suggest organizations provide that for people who are going to be in an ambassador program?
I think a lot of that comes down to what surfaced in our co-creation workshop about the need for support. If you don't have support from your leadership, from your management, then you're not going to necessarily feel safe to kind of take this different path that is maybe at the moment considered a little unusual, getting away from your normal everyday job. So I really think a lot of it is going to come down to support from leadership for these ambassadors to really, truly be successful.
And tagging on to that, and this is just true across the board when it comes to studies of psychological safety, it includes the freedom to fail. Something that Jody pointed out to us midway through our project was that in the process of storytelling around innovation, it's important not just to tell the success stories, but also the learnings. Where did things go off the rails a little bit? Or what did we learn from that? And so it'd be important to make sure that these innovation ambassadors, via their trainings and their own support group, have the ability to get it wrong sometimes. That's how you up psychological safety. There is a freedom
to safely fail and to keep innovating.
We have a couple bigger, some other, is there, oh yeah, go ahead.
A couple things. I noticed in the animation where the gentleman reached out to the ambassador to help solve a problem that he was facing within his area. So there was a lot of motivation there between that interaction between the ambassador and innovation and the business side of it. So I'm curious as to what was the interaction between James and Sheree, and what problems did they work on, and did they solve anything?
So our goal for phase 2 wasn't necessarily to completely solve a problem. We did want them to just sort of think through a problem statement. You know, here's my problem. What are some potential solutions that we could come up with? They actually each thought of solutions independently and then came back together and kind of reviewed those. They thought about different ways they might test this idea and sort of what metrics they would consider, what metrics would be considered successful. But the goal of phase 2 wasn't to get to an actual finished product. We just didn't have time for that in this.
Oh.
Yes, it was a problem that Sheree specifically brought. Like, we asked her to come with a problem she was currently experiencing and bring that to Jason for them to discuss.
Jason, do you have any thoughts? How was your experience?
Anything to add, Jason?
And we have a fourth member.
It was actually a really good conversation. It was a 1 hour, very focused conversation. And I gave kudos to the team because the template laid out that format that we needed to walk through. The scenario that we went through was a SharePoint transfer. So the organization, you know, has a share file and also has an S drive, and they're transferring files and making sure we can operate and get all the current files and everybody on board. So we just kind of walked through that scenario. And we brainstormed to their point. You know, we took about 10 minutes apart after we worked through some of those solutions. We went on mute, just did some brainstorming independently. We came back and then we prioritized. We each came up with 3 different ideas on how we could solve this problem. We then shared those ideas, and then we prioritized them in order of 1 through 6. And then we picked the top 2 out of those and kind of worked through those a little bit more, went back and redesigned it. And so that format, that template really helped us. And it was a very engaging conversation. It was actually really good. And I think she felt very actually like she had a solution at the end of it. So I thought it was very productive.
Thanks, Jason.
I'm gonna just keep running. Yeah, go ahead, Jody. We're gonna, there's one more big question on the chat and then go. Okay. There's been a couple questions about, and I'm gonna let the students lean in on what you heard. Around what would you ask for the DFW executives? What role do they play in driving innovation wins? And another question kind of overlapped with that of this culture begins at the top. So with that in mind, what specific tasks might be necessary at the higher levels? And you guys kind of talked about this a little bit, but again, walking into this space as students and not working here and kind of seeing things, but just kind of what you observed around what is it going to take from the top?
Yeah, I can take that. One word that we constantly heard during our co-creation session was encouragement, which was not a word that we had really, I think, thought of. I think we were kind of talking about nominating or raising your hand, but a lot of the employees were just looking for encouragement. And so I think for me, the leadership's role is kind of being like that hype person around it, just really encouraging employees of all levels to really get around this idea. And I think if the leadership can kind of help preach the value, obviously you'd want use cases, some test use cases to have numbers and data behind that to get the full buy-in. But I really think the leadership's role for a program like this is just really being that encourager to have people kind of take that extra step in their career to take something like this on, or even to use innovation ambassadors as a resource.
Yeah, I would echo Casey's thoughts there. I think that's so true. That encouragement, that extra shout out or not. I mean, ideally, in a really robust version of this program as it's rolled out, we would want divisions to take a lot of pride in the number of innovation ambassadors they have, to be able to share out those wins, whether it's in a monthly capacity or in a quarterly format, to say like, here's what's coming out of planning right now. Or seeing these wins and concessions thanks to the 2 innovation ambassadors. who have worked this scenario for the last 4 months, right? I think it is that level of pride, building that into the culture of like, this is what innovation ambassadors do with our team. We can fully leverage and get behind that.
Okay, first of all, I want to tell you guys, awesome job.
Thank you.
I think you surfaced a couple of things that we talked about in the beginning really, really nicely. So diversity and the importance of cross-functional collaboration. You talked about the value and getting into people's goals. And you surfaced something that I think I would call fear among people, which is I'm afraid that I won't either get credit or that I won't be supported in this. And I think those are really critical parts of, you know, what we might do here with a network of people that we train and support and, you know, leverage across the organization. So I want to applaud you guys, and I hope everyone will join me in a big applause for this team. Congratulations, nicely done.
Thank you.
All right, we'll transition to the next team if we want to switch up unless there's anything else.
No, I guess just for the folks on Zoom, the screen share will be paused as we transition,
Oh.
but you are still with us.
Thank you.
PowerPoint version? Okay, just wanted to make sure, thank you. All right.
Good morning, everyone. We are Team ACE. ACE comes from the first letter of each of our names. And today we're going to be presenting the link between habit building and unlocking innovation within DFW Airport employees. But to get us started, we're first going to introduce ourselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alain Mota. I'm a third-year MADI student. I'm also a program manager and a coordinator at SMU.
I'm Caroline Harms. I'm an interior design consultant, a second-year MADI student, and also the MADI graduate assistant.
I'm Emily Lee, and I'm a UX designer.
So to get us started, we started our semester with the question, how might we unlock the power of innovation within DFW Airport employees? And in order to be really clear, we needed to look further into what this means. So we quickly realized that innovation is not one size fits all. And ultimately, this foundational statement helped us realize that instead of forcing one plan, we could lean into varied approaches. Teammates spent time brainstorming and surveying our friends and family on what their thoughts on innovation were. And once we had a good feel for the purposes of our how might we question, we quickly shifted to how might we help the DFW innovation team and DFW innovation employees. So as a class, we met with Jody Brinkerhoff in order to gain a better understanding on their innovation imperative and how we might help DFW innovation employees.
And she recognized that there are cultural barriers to the idea of unlocking innovation for all employees and emphasized the idea of supporting managers with the tools to help influence the company culture. And lastly, that there was room for opportunity for collaboration within the 3-year plan. So through this briefing, our team decided we needed to further unpack this 3-year vision that the innovation team had created. And we decided to dig a little bit deeper into what had been and had not been started. So we reached out to Jody with a list of questions to see what had been discovered, tested, and scaled. And we learned a couple things. So first, we learned that there was room to learn what the innovation mindset training had been taken away and how they had applied it to their everyday work life. We learned that there was an opportunity to develop an innovation persona. And lastly, that there was room to recognize individuals who had excelled at integrating innovation mindset strategy into their work. And so through this briefing with Jody and her responses to the questions, our team really resonated with the ideas of, are people applying the training? Are people being recognized for it? And how might this training live on in the future? So in order to start working in these habits, our team decided that we were going to hone in on habit building. Habits are not formed easily. They must be practiced regularly. And we believe that building innovation mindset habits could lead to something consistent and measurable. So through this briefing with Jody and our deep dive into innovation, we really resonated with this idea of habit building. So we thought maybe you could unlock the power of innovation within employees by building a habit. But we're not experts in habits. So we began reading, researching, and reaching out to experts who might be able to help us form a more clear understanding on how we could help form a habit.
So according to James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, habits lay the foundation for mastery. So his research really focused around repeated behavior and how repeated behavior forms habits and how those habits give you the foundation for mastery. But James Clear didn't give a definitive answer about how many days does it take to build a habit. In an article on Healthline, Scott Frothingham points out to the idea of having a range that averages to about 66 days. So James Clear also points out to the idea of having habits linked to the hierarchy of change. So the first layer is outcomes. Outcomes is concerned with changing your results. The second layer is based on process. Processes are concerned with changing your habits and your systems. And the last and deepest layer is concerned with your identity. And that's really about changing your beliefs. Outcomes is about what you get. For example, I ran a 10K. Process is about what you do. I wake up, put my tennis shoes on, go run for 45 minutes, do it 5 times a week. Identity is about what you believe. I believe I'm a runner. So we wanted to really link at this idea and it really expressed to us an opportunity for us to really think about the DFW employees. We knew 100% of them had taken this innovation mindset training. And we wonder if really instilling in them the habit building and habits would potentially create an identity for them as an innovator. So we needed to research more about habits. Habit building in James Clear's book talks about a process that is a 4-step process: cue, craving, response, and reward. So cue is this trigger that activates your brain into action, into actually performing the behavior, right? Craving is about this desire to really change your inner state. Response is really action driven. It's you actually behaving this way. And it's really about, has a motivation versus friction relationship. And it's also based on ability. And craving is really the end goal of every habit. So these 4 simple steps together form a neurological feedback loop called the habit loop. So James Clear wanted to use this 4-step process to really respond to strategies or to a tool set that can help you instill the habit. He calls these the 4 laws of habits. So in order for you to make it emphasize the cue, you make it obvious. If you want to promote the craving, you make it attractive. If you want to enact a response, you make it easy. And you want to entice a reward, you make it satisfying. So we really wanted to hone down into these simple concepts to anchor our idea for what we can do in the next steps. the 4 laws of habits, and the habit loop.
We believe that habits could lead to the activation of innovation mindset training, but it was time for us to get out of our assumption and start to work with the people that we're designing for. So we reached out to DFW Airport employees to get a baseline. If we are building habits and behavior, where does the behavior need to start? We pull out some of the important quotes that give us the aha, what's up with that moment from the interview with DFW Airport employees. In the interview, we ask questions about what they think about the innovation training and if there is a field for improvement. Overall, we heard a lot of good responses, but we also discovered some area of opportunities. The first one we heard is from one of the planning manager at DFW Airport. He mentioned that using airport example would really be useful for tangible ROI for employees. We see this as a desire to work on more airport-specific problems. We also heard from Lisa again, Vice President Operation at DFW Airport. She mentioned that I would like to see recognition or earning something as you go through and you actually implement what you learn. We see that as merits and recognition are important and wanted. And the last category that we had was impact. As Jason Williams, Senior Innovation Implementation Manager mentioned, we did not get to see the full impact of these trainings. Now, after we heard from the DFW Airport employees and had a better understanding of what could be helpful for them, we came to the conclusion that gamification could help build habits. So we dove into research mode again and started to learn as much as we can about gamification. But aside from research, we also know that at SMU, we had access to experts that had experience working with interactive technology and gamification. So we reached out to a couple of them and hope that we can learn more about how to make gamified experience more successful.
So we had this hunch that our research on habit building and after talking to DFW Airport employees, that gamification could be one of our key ingredients. So we spoke to 2 gamification experts at SMU, Dr. Tony Cuevas, who is the Assistant Dean of Technology and Innovation at the Annette Caldwell Simmons School of Education and Human Development, and Gary Brubaker, who is the director of SMU Guildhall, which is the #1 gaming school in the country. Dr. Cuevas touched on the topics of community and collaboration and gamifying to make content attractive and appealing. And Gary spoke about the importance of using strategies to encourage the player that they are doing great. Additionally, we learned that gamifying can incentivize and accelerate learning while also providing valuable data. It encourages social connection between employees, and it could allow employees to connect to the culture at DFW Airport. So we came to the hypothesis that if we could design a way for the innovation mindset content to be experienced repeatedly and accessed anywhere, that might help DFW employees form a habit. So we questioned how we might take all of these things and put it into something we could actually test. We came back to our initial realization that innovation is not one size fits all. So we set out to design something that could be tailored to how the user wants to experience it, making it attractive, easy, obvious, and satisfying, thus hopefully forming a habit. We knew that we weren't experts in habits or games or designing apps, but we are experts in human-centered design. So we designed a repeated experience that can be accessed anywhere, which is innovation game storming. It was extremely important to us that we took everything we learned from DFW employees, from experts, and our research to make something that was truly human-centered at its core. Ultimately, we landed on innovation game storming. We believe that habit forming and gamification could really unlock the power within innovation, within DFW Airport employees. So what is innovation game storming? Innovation game storming is a 2-part brainstorming activity that can be accessed anywhere using your phone or your computer. It takes the 3 main components of the innovation mindset training, which are questioning, exploring, and experimenting, and it pairs it with original content that we designed. So we made sure to gamify the whole experience, making sure it was interactive, attractive, satisfying, and thought-provoking at the same time. And we took innovation, gamification, and brainstorming fun activities and came up with the name Innovation Game Storming.
So are you ready to wrap up your innovation practice with us? let's get on board, buckle your seatbelts, strap-ons, and let's really experience about innovation game storming. So the first thing that we needed to do with our prototype was to come back to the idea of customization. We gave our users choices so that we can really think about them having an easy access to our innovation game storm. And we also gave them a way to build up an attractive practice of their habits. So the first thing that we did is we asked you what platform was your preference. So if the user chose a mobile device, they would actually get a reply to give us your phone number. Once you give us your phone number, they get a text notification prompting you to respond so that we know that you got it and you got an active link to start gaming with us. If instead of your mobile device, you chose your laptop, you had a second tier of choices here. You could get a notification by email, or you could get a notification by your calendar invite. Again, we will prompt you to reply to us, and then you would get your active link again to start your game.
We asked our user how long they will be willing to participate in each activity, which helped us design our prototype because we want to make sure it's not too long, not too challenging. We also asked, how often would you like to participate in our prototype in a week? Lastly, we asked them what kind of merits and reward would be most valuable to them because we want them to feel appreciated in a way they would like. So overall, we have 10 DFW Airport employees responded to our survey, which is great. 50% of the employee would like to participate through a mobile device, which was surprising to us because we did not anticipate that at all. In addition, 80% of the participants would want to participate 1 to 2 times a week, and most of them will appreciate some sort of merit.
So after we heard from DFW employees on how they wanted to be engaged and participate in innovation game storming, it was our turn to set up a production schedule on the back end. We needed to make sure that we were sending out activities at the time they requested, that we were sending out nudges, and just making sure that we had everything in order for their experiences to begin. And after all the back end technical work was done, we launched the second part of innovation game storming. So we'd like to share with you slide by slide what innovation game storming looks like. We leaned into the innovation mindset training content, and we designed our own activities within the categories questioning, exploring, and experimenting to activate what had been learned in the training. So this is the way we designed the innovation game storming experience to take place. After the initial survey, you would receive your first questioning exercise. The next day at the time you requested, you would receive your first exploring exercise, and the following day, your first experimenting exercise. So after the completion of one full set of questioning, exploring, and experimenting, you would loop back to questioning. But before I get too far into it, let's take a look at what users saw when participating in innovation game storming. So we made sure to include a little recap of the step of the innovation mindset they were on. And in this case, it was questioning. So we gave the user a little bit of a definition on what they could look forward to and examples of how they could begin questioning. And after the users received a small recap, it was their turn to participate, where they started with the question, what would I try to fix if I knew it was okay to fail? We wanted the user to feel really comfortable brainstorming anything and everything related to their job at DFW and really evoke that questioning mindset.
After you're done with your question and activity, you would get a notification for exploring. In your incoming prompt, you get a progression reference point and a quick hello, how are you? The next step on that part would be for you to really review the innovation mindset exploring part, pinpointing on some of the things that we thought was really important. The next part is we really wanted to design an experience that was grounded on the airport and wanted the user to start thinking and solving some of the issues at the airport. So like you see in this picture. The next part of it, we wanted to have people reflect with empathy and really think about who would be some brainstorming, collaborating partners that could be part of this idea. And lastly, we gave them a window for them to actually pinpoint some of the solutions that they could come up with.
So once they complete the exploring activity, they will receive another notification which prompt them to experimenting activity. Now this page, just to let them know they made it to experimenting. And again, we want to make sure we remind them what experimenting is all about in innovation mindset training, which focus on a paper test before investing a lot of money and time in one specific solution. So for this particular experimenting, we want to make sure it did not require too much time or material. So we simply ask them to take one of the how might we question they have been thinking about and simply come up with one potential solution, and they can simply sketch it out or describe it. In all the activities that we design, we make sure to add animated confetti when they submit their responses, and we just want to make them feel rewarded and engaged down to the smallest detail. So now you have seen our prototype, and we're going to show you the journey map that all the 10 DFW Airport employees went through. So actually, this is the journey map that we designed and intended to be used for our prototype. So 4 participants actually went through this journey map. As you can see, there's no nudges in the map, and which means they received the notification and they complete their activity on the day. We also have 3 participants went through this particular journey map. As you can see, there's 2 red dots on the map. That just means they were being reminded along the way because they simply did not finish or start the activity. But when they were being nudged, they actually went back and finished it. Now, this journey map is a lot different than previous one. As you can see, there's a lot more nudges along the way. And 3 DFW Airport employees actually did not engage with the activities at all. And when this happened, we want to know why are they not engaging. So we reach out to one of the participants, and she actually told us that she was sick the whole week, and that's why she could not engage with the activity. And that just tells us that participation rate can only tell us so much until we reach out and learn more. And this is the notification that looks like before each activity, and we just want to show you. And this is how the reminder looks like when we notice someone did not finish their activity or haven't started yet.
So now that you've heard all about innovation game storming and explored some of our exercises, it's also really important for us to touch on the principles that innovation game storming was designed around. This leads us to our first principle, which was to cue employees by using airport-related content that they could relate and apply their expertise to, so that exercises they would be doing could be applicable to projects they were on. Our next design principle was craving. And in order for users to want to spend time and participate in these activities, it was important to make activities something that they actually wanted to come back to, AKA making it attractive to them.
Our design principle 3 is response. This focused on making the activity accessible and easy, which provided an unexpected depth of responses. Now, please don't try to read this. We know the words are tiny, but we're gonna show you a couple of good responses in the next slide. But we were simply surprised and blown away about how in-depth the DFW Airport employee went into answering all our activities. So we thought this is an excellent question that could be incorporated in the future activities, such as why are there never enough wheelchairs for customers? And how to improve the communication between internship briefing. And lastly, but not least, our design principle 4 is merit and reward. And this is just a quote that you already seen before from Lisa. I would like to see recognition or earning something as you go through and you actually implement what you learned. The impact of our work lies in how it might unlock innovation within DFW Airport employees. The diagram on the right portrays the important principles that included in innovation game storming that we believe could do so. First, usability and accessibility. Ensure that all DFW Airport employees, including whether they are frontline workers or working at corporate office, can play innovation game storming. When everyone has access to play the same activity, which encourage collaboration and share ideas. Second, a feedback loop provides a content bank for the innovation team and informs new content for the future innovation game storming activities. And finally, immersion. When people have the control and the power to control and design their own experiences, It provides the practice of innovation and crafting their own ideas and bringing it up to their managers. Now, this brings our presentation to an end. We want to thank you for coming today and listen. And also want to say a big thank you to Jody Brinkerhoff and her team and all the DFW Airport employees that we have the pleasure working with today. In addition, if you would like to play our innovation game Storming, we are going to pass out the invitation card right now, and you can simply scan the QR code on top of it. So again, thank you so much. Now we will open our floor for questions.
Great presentation. I'd like to hear more about the survey. So just kind of to get a sense of, so 10 people hand selected, or in other words, I'd like to understand what the 70% participation means and what that would really translate against 2,000 people. Is it realistic that most people will do it? And if so, will we still get 70% participation, or will that drop much lower?
Yeah, that's a great question. So those people that we were talking about, we actually reached out to Jody Brinkerhoff, and she provided us with about 25 people that were sent the initial survey. And from those 25 people, those were the respondents. So then we moved forward with those people and we got their survey results. And then we took them to the next stage which was actually questioning, exploring, and experimenting. Do you want to kind of touch on that?
I think the one thing that we discovered also is that the depth of knowledge in the content that was self-generating would be really attractive for people to kind of, start telling, do a word of mouth kind of, if you will, campaign. And so I think that's part of the exploration part that we wanted to explore a little bit further. But I think that's potentially a good question to continue to keep asking.
Yeah, and just to add on, and this is just still very early stage of this prototype. And ideally, this could be something like some sort of people can access anywhere. So like you can always go back in and respond. So rather than we have to make sure we track them, it can be something more like automated and stuff like that. But that's up to your discretion to decide in the future.
Just for clarification, was the idea that you tag this on the heels of innovation mindset training? So once you close out the training, then you activate through this program and it continues the conversation for you?
Exactly. So we kind of explored that after the mindset training, this could live on like through text or through a computer, like a couple days after, or really as long as you were thinking, maybe like a 2-week period, just to keep them still questioning and exploring and experimenting with that reminder. Maybe not something that lives on forever, but that was like one avenue we explored.
It's a really interesting concept because we've been working closely with learning and development on these programs. And one of the things that someone said after the training was, let's see what happens afterwards. And so the opportunity to activate that training on the heels of shutting down your computer that day is really interesting.
So gamification is becoming such a popular way of learning today. Have you guys discovered any unique ways of opening people's minds to appreciate the power of that type of learning?
When we talk to both of our experts, they surface a couple of best practices, if you will, right? And I think one of the things is like storyline and having the sense of community be involved in it. The interesting part for us is the fact that this could be like, again, self-generating content. So the idea here for us is to, again, surface, making it accessible, easy, obvious, all of those things. I think in that sense, the community would actually say to the community, here's how we make it attractive. So I think the more we heard from our users, I think that we can and some of the responses showed that we can actually start surfacing some of the things that are really important that could work across business units. Because I felt in our interviews that that was the next step in the ask from our users. They mentioned how these, and to Jody's point, that some of these things could live on their own. But then again, they want more deeper content to be accessible in here.
So when you did it, is the idea that that content is self-generated and that just stays with me, the person who's playing? Or does that content then get pushed somewhere where that idea could get further explored? Because it's a quick engagement. And then what happens to all that information? So does the person just walk away and say, great, I went through the exercise, I get it, and now I do X? Or does that content get shared and pushed somewhere so that somebody else can look at the idea and build off of it?
Yeah, ideally, we would like to have all this content be pushed somewhere where everyone that has access can see. And in this way, all those like very specific to DFW questions, every department can see them and actually talk about it. And ideally can create like a collaboration between across departments.
Within a content base.
Yeah, within the content.
Any other questions? We had one more from on Zoom about if you guys found any other analogous kind of innovation habit forming models in other places in your research or any other space, or do you feel like this is kind of really new for, what did you guys find?
So during our research, we actually were able to interview one of the book called Eat, Sleep, Innovate. And we were able to interview the author, Scott. And in the book, he mentioned about Being framework, which is focused on behavior enabler, artifacts, and nudges. And that's why in our prototype, you can see we focus on sending reminders and nudges, because we all know that DFW Airport employees are busy. And sometimes, you want to help with other coworkers and you forgot to complete this and that. So we want to make sure that we send out friendly reminders through your preferences, such as calendar invites and text message and all that.
Great. Okay, let's hear for this group. Thank you.
We are ground control to major team, ground control for short. My name is Ryan Lozano. I'm a community consultant at Verdunity.
My name is Ramisa Farouk, and I'm a UX researcher at DocuSign.
I'm Jessica Godwin, and I work for a real estate tech startup.
And my name is Deborah, and I am currently a graphic designer at SMU. So when we first began our journey with DFW International Airport, we met with Jody Brinkerhoff, who shared with us that this was actually a really neat time for the airport as they were undergoing a massive transformation internally. We also saw this as a huge opportunity as we approached our design question, which, as you know, was, how might we unlock the power of innovation within DFW Airport employees? So approaching this design question from a more human-centered design perspective, we knew that it was important to both connect with and understand the people that we were designing for. So as part of that discovery, we interviewed 8 DFW Airport employees, ranging from different leadership levels, as well as different departments, such as airfield operations and planning. We also held 4 external industry expert interviews with people that ranged in specialized areas such as innovation, as well as the workplace. We really felt like all of these interviews helped us hone in on exactly where our key areas of opportunity were. To make sense of these key areas, we leaned pretty heavily into some theoretical frameworks in our secondary research. The first being Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is essentially a pyramid structure of basic human needs built on survival, security, belonging, importance, and fulfillment. We also leaned into Hershey's social bonding theory, which is built on the basis that people will conform to positive behaviors that the society values based on the 4 bonds of commitment, involvement, attachment, and belief. Both Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Hershey's social bonding theory really helped us to gain a better understanding of what the human needs were, as well as what drives human behaviors. So combining and applying these into more of an organizational context, we see that there's a direct correlation with engagement. Essentially, if you follow these methodologies, you will see an improvement in engagement culture within an organization, which our literature shows is a pivotal piece to creating a more innovative culture. So what exactly are some forces that help to push innovation and engagement? We saw that there were three key factors: environment, emotional well-being, and cross-functional collaboration. With environment, we see that places shape behavior. An employee's workspace, their workplace, as well as their overall environment in general is going to shape a culture over time. With emotional well-being, we see that employees have both functional and psychosocial needs that must be met within the workplace in order for them to feel like they're being supported emotionally. And then with cross-functional collaboration, we see the importance of encouraging employees to both work and network alongside their peers in the organization so they can connect and build relationships with them so that they can facilitate collaborations in the future. So tying all of this together, we hypothesize that if we build an environment that focuses on cross-functional collaboration, that would then bolster the emotional well-being in the employees, which would break down barriers, disrupt the status quo, and ultimately lead to a more engaging and innovative culture within DFW Airport.
Employees need to establish trust to connect with one another. Dr. Tracy Brower, who is an author and sociologist on workplace happiness and fulfillment, shares that trust is only built when people open and share. This is what creates that cycle where we start to reinforce each other's skills and contributions and allow people to feel comfortable collaborating with one another. We wanted to make sure that whatever we were designing would enforce this cycle. All of this brings us to our refined how might we to say that by improving the emotional well-being of DFW employees through cross-functional environmental effects, we could potentially unlock the power of innovation within them. To test our hypothesis, we prototyped brain dates. So notably in a feedback session with David Datschek from Giant Innovation, we had shared an early stage prototype with him. And he actually validated a lot of our thinking by sharing that brain dates were practiced in the industry for peer-to-peer connections. So we incorporated a lot of the best practices that he had shared into our original concept, but ultimately curating a very specific brain date experience just for DFW Airport employees. So you're probably wondering, what are brain dates? Brain dates are knowledge sharing sessions where DFW employees are matched in small groups across various roles and departments to connect and collaborate. Taking in what we learned from our discovery, we applied the factors of environment, well-being, and cross-functional collaboration to DFW Airport. These then became the pillars of our brain date. So now when we consider environment, we want to make sure that we're leveraging the communal spaces offered here at DFW Airport. We also want to be intentional about how we're organizing these groups across roles and departments to promote cross-functional collaboration. And we want to provide a framework for conversation that's both personal and professional to increase well-being.
Once we established these pillars, we began designing the Brain Day experience. We coordinated with Jody in order to select the best day and time for the event. We ultimately ended on 11 a.m. midweek as it provided a great segue into the lunch hour. We leveraged the Learning Center in order to accommodate a large number of small groups. We then design an invite to include all of these logistic decisions, as well as a brief description of the event and an incentive in order to encourage employees to attend. We then send out this invitation to approximately 30 DFW Airport employees. We received many responses to our invitation, and we intentionally grouped our 19 anticipated attendees to create diversity at each table. We were intentional to make sure that we included different departments as well as leadership levels in order to make sure that the groups were cross-functional. We intentionally went out to have tables of 2, 3, or 4 participants at each table in order to test different prototype ideas. And then we we were thrilled that we finally had 24 people participate, including all 19 attendees, as well as 5 walk-ins that day. Co-design is the process of designing with internal stakeholders in order to get the best engagement from the intended audience. We collaborated with Janice Gensch, from the L&D team in order to design our prototype experience in a better way. We talked with her in order to iterate through our ideas, and she validated one idea that we had, which was to create a guide for the prototype. We did this in order to create a better structure for the event, as well as to create better engagement among DFW Airport employees. In order to do this, in sticking with our theme of a date, we created a menu to provide a framework for our conversations. These menus allowed people to choose a question as they needed to support their conversation. The starters were a brief introduction for all participant employees. The small plates were created in order to be a brief but engaging way to get employees talking, as well as to facilitate conversation. They can be answered as simple yes or no questions, but also provide a great segue into lots of conversations and storytelling. Main course questions are intended to be open-ended, so it allows for greater conversations that go much deeper. These are mostly casual and personal in nature, but also include some with a professional focus. And we also included ground control recommendations in order to narrow down the list for people who might be overwhelmed by too many options. Lastly, we included a section for sides, which are optional blue sky type questions that are meant to drive to further engagement and greater collaboration among group participants.
So to kind of get a perspective of what it was like to be on the brain date, I'm going to walk through the participants' journey, starting with arrival. Excuse me. So once the brain date participants arrived at the Learning Center, they were greeted by two of our hosts who gathered some general information to get them seated at their respective tables. Once they were seated and introductions were starting to happen at each table, we then had two of our waiters give some ground rules of engagement for the brain date session. We call these the community norms. After those first few phases of the test, we were then able to allow them to run their own brain dates, having already given them the casual space to connect with one another, as well as engage in stimulating conversations. And then to wrap everything up, we wanted to end on a little bit of a debrief session. This actually ended up being much more collaborative in nature, as we got a lot of really good insight and feedback as to what DFW brain dates could look like moving forward. We also saw this as a great way to stay connected, since all of the relationships and connections that were made within the brain date session itself could then be carried out into the DFW brain date participants' everyday workspaces.
So diving further into our testing experience, we're going to outline a few of the design decisions and design successes that we observed, correlating back to our three main pillars. First, starting off with the environment, looking at the room and the tables that we put our participants around. Since we were testing in the Learning Center, we really wanted to leverage the natural light and visibility that the room had to offer, subconsciously connecting back to a level of transparency and clarity that we wanted to foster in our conversations. We also wanted our community norms to be front and center, also connecting back to a level of psychological safety. And finally, we put together groups of tables for 2 to 4 in conjunction with the learning and development team. And what we put on those tables is a group of decisions that we're going to outline now. We wanted to have fun with it, so we put our groups of tables on the name of different airplane models. We also put our menus front and center so that if the conversation needed to be stimulated or stagnated in any way, participants could order their favorite menu items and keep the conversation rolling. We also put down sticky notes, pens, and markers so that participants could doodle, take notes, or share ideas. And we also put down white parchment paper to serve as a tablecloth, kind of reminding you of maybe your favorite neighborhood Italian restaurant where your kids would maybe doodle on. We also put down candy, mints, and gum to really just keep it light, fun, and casual. So from these design decisions, we were able to observe some different environmental design successes. Most notably, we saw that participants were really not only engaging with each other, but really buying into the whole experience and engaging with the table. We saw that as the conversations grew louder and louder throughout the session, it even drowned out the music that we had put on for the background. We also saw that people were really leaning into taking notes and sharing ideas. And after the session, we walked around and saw diagrams of different projects and ideas that were being shared. And finally, we saw that there were great balance in all the conversations. No one person was dominating any one conversation at a single table.
The second pillar of brain dates is well-being. Within well-being, we focused on the menus as a guide for conversation, community norms, and incentives. The menus were designed to be familiar to the participants. We provided questions at different levels of engagement in order to support the conversation should the threat of an awkward silence arise. The community norms were provided as ground rules for engaging in conversation. These were provided to remind participants that brain dates are a fun, casual, and most importantly, safe engagement where everyone can feel safe to share and also is heard. And lastly, we know that appreciation is very important for making employees have great emotional well-being. And we are very grateful to the innovation team for providing lunch that day as a form of appreciation for all of those who participated in our prototype. Some of the design successes that we experienced here are the conversations that we observed that were organic, that allowed everyone to share and that outgrew the framework of the guide that we provided. Additionally, we noticed that conversations were relaxed and natural, and we saw various verbal cues or visual cues, such as eye contact and smiling, as well as heard lots of laughter. Also, from our survey, we noticed that participants felt very appreciated through having lunch, and it also contributed to a more community feel throughout the event. Finally, we noticed that because of participating in brain dates, the conversations continue to evolve into conversations about innovation and further collaboration that could be key to the future of DFW Airport.
The last pillar that we'll cover today is the cross-functional pillar. There are two main areas of focus in this pillar: self-directed casual conversations and the importance of organized groups. The first design decision in this pillar was to ensure that employees were being matched with people that they did not know or did not work with day to day. As you've heard, we matched people in groups of 2 to 4. And by placing employees in groups and providing them the space along with the framework for conversation, our intent was to give them just enough to get started. So we managed the time, but they self-directed their conversations, ultimately creating the connections that would live and grow beyond the session. Summarizing some of the design successes in this pillar, as you know, we had control groups of 2, 3, and 4, but we actually ended up having all groups of 4 due to increased participation. And in our debrief, as well as our results from the survey, participants agreed that 4 people was just the right amount of people for a session like this, where they felt it was enough to stay engaged, but also still feel like they got the most value out of the session. A success metric for this pillar as well was that 100% of participants met someone new. And even those that knew somebody at the table learned something new about one another. For example, there was one group that had 2 coworkers that had worked together for 10 years, and they shared with us that they learned more about each other in 30 minutes than they had working together for 10 years. So even if you did know somebody at the table, it proves that you can foster new depths of connection. And last, although we provided a menu with both professional and personal topics, all of the groups snowballed into talking about things that were not on the menu, such as work opportunities, cross-collaborating on projects, and just talking through ideas. There were so many instances of people saying, you know, like, so-and-so can help me on this project, or I'm going to bring this person on board for this project. There was even a group that was talking through a current project that they're working on, And after the session, they shared with us that they're rethinking their entire approach. So it's things like that that we feel make brain dates have that lasting impact beyond just attending and participating in a session. Tying back to our hypothesis, we really wanted to see how our design decisions and observations affect engagement culture. I mentioned some of these already, but I feel it's important to mention again. 100% of participants met someone new. 100% of participants are willing to participate in a brain date again. And all of the groups talked about something that was not on the menu, suggesting that conversations evolve naturally. This is not just from the survey, but also what we physically saw in the room. We had a 60% response rate in our survey from everyone that attended brain dates. But of those that responded, 87% said that they would be willing to champion or facilitate a brain date session in the future. 65% said that they would be willing to meet monthly. And this was also a question that we asked in our debrief, and the group collectively agreed that a month-to-month cadence for something like this was ideal. So as you can see, we've received a lot of positive feedback. In fact, I don't think we received any negative feedback. It's very clear that the participants had a lot of fun. It was a nice change of pace from their day-to-day, but still felt really, really productive. However, it was this feedback that we got in our survey that just really struck us. This participant is so grateful to the innovation team for having provided a platform for connection and collaboration, saying that it's one of the only outlets for creativity and a real force for innovation. Clearly, there's a hunger for opportunities like this at DFW Airport, and we feel that a program like Brain Dates can not only just see success here, but be a catalyst for innovation mindset and even ultimately break down some of those barriers.
I agree with Ramisa. I think that got me fired up. And so for us, we design brain dates in this one specific way, but we see it living on in some different ways. And we identified some key principles that we believe will make brain dates, in no matter what form it takes, an important tool in unlocking the innovation mindset at DFW moving forward. So the first principle is rooted in intentional connections. We recommend that the groups are constructed of people across different departments, roles, tenure, and leadership level to really bolster that cross-functional pillar that we've been talking about today. We also recommend that groups be paired. Groups of 4 worked really well in our initial test, but we understand that flexibility is going to be needed for the future. So we recommend that groups be anywhere from 2 to 5 participants. We also recommend that groups have no distinct role or responsibility when they meet. And we also recommend that executives and managers really promote brain dates as a tool for both professional and personal development to their employees. The second principle is rooted in the creation of a flexible framework for relatable conversations, tongue twister. And we use a menu for this, but we could see this looking like a set of topic cards or even a digital format, essentially wanting to create a structure or guide that can allow the conversations to evolve and go beyond the original scope. We recommend this to be something that can have the participants drive their own conversations. And we also recommend that this have work-related and personal topics included. The final principle is rooted in leveraging the casual, neutral, and informal environments that DFW has to offer. We really think that brain dates thrive in these types of environments. And we recommend that brain dates are held in the various buildings across all of campus to get people to meet and collaborate in these types of spaces. We recommend this because we want our participants to get out of their day-to-day workspace and see how they can connect and collaborate in casual, informal environments. And finally, no matter where brain dates are held at DFW, we strongly recommend that community norms are established at the beginning of every single session.
So now, as we revisit our design challenge of how might we unlock the power of innovation within DFW Airport employees, we can conclude that by enabling knowledge sharing sessions for DFW employees to connect across the organization can improve their well-being through the creation of intentional cross-functional environments. That's a wrap for our presentation, but before we take questions, I just want to take a minute to express our utmost gratitude on behalf of our entire class. A huge thank you to the DFW Airport Innovation team for the opportunity. To anybody that interviewed any of us, thank you so much for your time and effort. A special thank you from us to Janice Gensch for being our co-designer, and of course, Jody for just accommodating everyone's needs and championing all of our initiatives and just sticking with us throughout the semester. And last but certainly not least, to our professors and our class who provided so much guidance throughout the semester. We could not have done this without any of you. So thank you so much. And we are happy to take your questions now.
We also have, we also have a mock of one of the tables that we put together for our participants. It's a little bit smaller, so we only can accommodate 2. But if you want to explore the table while we're taking questions and discussions, feel free.
So we'll take questions for this group specifically.
We also have the menus that we put together that Deborah's gonna walk around and pass out.
Just a question on the, when you put the tables together, did
Yeah.
you notice any hesitancy amongst the people at the table based on, I hate to say like the role they play in the organization or the level that they are in the organization, or didn't even matter, that once people sat down, it was more of a casual conversation? Sometimes people could be hesitant depending on who's sitting at the table.
Sure. I think we do have some participants in the room, so perhaps if they want to speak up to that, we can. But from our perspective, we saw that participants, once they were all seated and kind of engaging, even before we got to debrief them on what was actually going to happen throughout the day, there was good rapport kind of being established, the hi, how are you, kind of stuff like that. And so since people weren't given a role or like expressly like directed to say, oh, I'm the VP, you're supposed to, talk to me, blah, blah, blah. There was no real hesitancy there from our perspective. But if there are participants who want to speak up, feel free.
I'll just quickly echo what Ryan just mentioned, because there were a couple of groups that had EVPs and really higher leadership at these tables, and we did closely observe them. I think one thing to call out is that leadership, they were very careful to not be on their phones and be really present in the conversation. And so I think if initially there was any hesitation, we didn't see any, but all of the tables were very engaging with one another. And I think one of the things that helped with that was the fact that nobody really came in with any computers. And even the higher up leadership executives weren't looking at their phones or like answering emails or anything like that. So they were very present, which I feel like really helped the engagement levels at all of the tables.
Not a question, but more of I have 2 comments. The first is I really like the idea of brain dates, and I love this menu. I'm going to steal this.
Good.
The other thing is kudos on the pillars that you identified, because it's very important, especially on the environment side. Having the right setting to foster the kind of collaboration and engagement is important. The only other thing I would add to that is consider a well-ventilated room, because there's a connection between your cognitive function and CO2 levels inside.
For sure. So, thank you.
Hey, I just want to make a comment. I was fortunate enough to be able to participate and really enjoyed it. And one of the things that I would say 18, 20 months into COVID, and I didn't really hear this in your presentation, but I would just add it to your list of accomplishments, is work has become very transactional, right? I mean, when you sit in front of a computer today, you lose that connection, you lose the sense of community. And for an organization like DFW, where we've just seen 200 people retire, we're trying to ensure an ongoing sense of community where people stay at the organization, not just because of X, Y, or Z, but because they like the people they work with. So the chance to build those connections, I thought was really, really powerful. And I think that was really one of the highlights, especially where we are, hopefully at the tail end of this pandemic. So think about adding that into your pitch.
For sure. Appreciate it.
We were surprised to hear that one of the questions that the groups enjoyed the most is, what has changed in your life since COVID? And they said that really got to some very personal conversations, and they thought that was a really good thing to build connection.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm just going to make a comment. I'm going to be totally honest. I was really concerned about this when you were going into the prototyping stage, that all these people that were invited would see this as a wah-wah, like I'm being forced to sit down to network at my company. And I thought maybe the only thing they were coming for was a favor and for pizza. And I was astonished at the feedback and how engaging everyone was in the room. So again, kudos to you guys for thinking it through and pushing us hard on this. Because I mean, I had one of those goosebump moments where I looked around and I thought, wow, these are my colleagues and they're enjoying getting to know each other in a forced conversation to a certain degree. So again, congratulations, you guys, really nicely done.
There's just a couple, oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul. Yes. Just online, there's just a comment that it's a great idea, probably a universal one, would work in any company that's trying to encourage innovation, creating space and manufacturing cross-functional collisions, and just a big push on just this idea of new depths for connection and how might we use this to help fulfill the purpose of our employees, or how might we use this to create customer-centric service model, and how can connecting on a deeper level when traveling with just a lot of this is, I think, fostering great ideas of connecting deeper, and that, like what Chris said, like we need more of it. So
Thanks, online people.
And I don't know if this question is probably tangential to what you did, but I'd just like to get your thoughts. All the teams, all three teams mentioned trust and building relationships. And obviously that's critically important. But I'm trying to get at, it's easy to trust people and get along with people when you all agree. Did you, when you looked at the beginning, when you did the model, and trust is so important, when you disagree, or when you don't have the same approach, or when you don't see the future the same way, that the balance between trust and disagreement, I think is an interesting, and I'm just looking for you all as your thoughts, and maybe, I don't know if any of the other teams want to, but because trust kept coming up and it's about building relationships, and I agree with that, but relationships are easy when you agree.
Sure.
Right?
I'll kick it off and then I'll spur my other teammates. And do we want to get everyone down here?
yeah, we can, you guys can kind of move up while Ryan's talking.
No,
Yeah,
you're good.
yeah.
I think for us, at least relating back to our prototype, having people at the same table, whether they agree, disagree, I think having that framework and structure to keep the conversation going no matter what, and not just dying because, okay, well, we don't agree on this, so we can't talk anymore. Like having that structure there to either pivot or take it deeper, ask another question, a why, okay, yes, and keep it there, is really something that I think Brain Dates kind of gives you the structure to keep going. And so that's my opinion, but I'll pass it off.
I think it's really hard to not like someone when you're face to face with them and you're connecting for an allotted time, as opposed to maybe being on a Zoom meeting where you disagree and then you shut your computer off and then you're just like, oh my God, I didn't like that, or I disagree. I just don't want to work with that person. It's a lot different when you're talking about multiple things, right, in one time frame. It is a lot harder when you have somebody, an actual human being in front of you, because we're all the same, right? So that's my thoughts on it.
Hold on, so you're gonna
water.
That trust doesn't come out of agreement, but the research and experience has shown that trust comes from liking. So what these teams have done is they've enabled an opportunity for people to have something in common. And that liking builds trust. And then agreement comes from the context, but that doesn't eliminate the trust, because the trust is built on liking. So these sort of interactions are important because you're creating common experiences.
One of the great things about trust is when you have it, people feel more comfortable disagreeing. So when you have an idea that maybe you are afraid will get shut down quickly, or other people might not like it, you're more willing to share that because you trust that other person cares about you and they don't want to hurt you, and maybe they'll provide great feedback or become your champion. Maybe you'll even change their mind. So that's a really big component of trust and how it leads to greater innovation.
I actually had a work-related conversation yesterday about having a shared belief and a commonality and like a likeness, I think you said, like having that between two people and establishing that up front, I think develops people who share that at a deeper level to be more, even maybe the most harsh critics of, you know, that either A, that person, or B, that cause that they're trying to rally behind, because they want it to be the best. And if DFW employees have that shared commonality and that shared mission of making DFW Airport one of the best airports, you know, even better than it already is, then having them be either A, harsh critics of each other, or maybe the organization or their managers or so on and so forth, having that be in a constructive and, you know, kind of critical framework, I think is only going to make DFW better. And having those conversations and platforms for that conversation is all the more important.
Are there any other questions or thoughts for the whole group or the whole class? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, great stuff. Love seeing all the thinking behind this. So there was a common pattern that each group noticed. It was, you know, habit change, innovation's hard, but the need for executive buy-in and support. So in thinking of your program, if you were going to hand it off to scale, what is your biggest challenge or fear that you would see in handing it off to another group so it can scale? And what would you do to make sure it was a success?
Sure. Anyone want to start? I think for us, we had some initial scalability kind of ideas around maybe attaching this to everyday like trainings that go through, new hire trainings, attaching these to them to say, you know, at the end of this training, you're going to get together with people that are either onboarding with you, but not necessarily in your department, and say, you know, have a menu that's curated maybe specifically to that. And wanting our prototype to be attached to existing kind of functions and trainings and other team building exercises could really make it allow it to scale and not get lost in an ether, and ideas can kind of live amongst those people and get supported by managers and executives.
I can build on that in terms of team free to move about when it comes to handing this over, thinking how innovation ambassadors can live on. I would say a point of concern and opportunity here is recognizing how to scale this to the frontline workers, right? So we kept hearing throughout these interviews and experiences that we have, like, you have a team of 60% that is working on the front lines, that is not here in headquarters with us right now. And these are folks who can leverage innovation ambassadors, but could also become innovation ambassadors. So I think a critical ask I would make of executive leadership is to think through how will you make sure to be invitational to the folks who are working in the terminals. I want to give a special shout out to Chris McLaughlin when we said, hey, we need to talk to frontlines folks. Within the space of like 2 hours, he was back with us saying, here's 4 people you can talk to. And these are people who had experience in the terminals, air traffic control, public safety. And I really hope that every single executive and VP across the org can think of those top half dozen frontline workers that they say, we need to get you in a room in front of these grad students. So champion your frontlines workers in whatever prototype or movement forward you do.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, the frontline folks that we were able to talk to were equally as excited about an opportunity like this and also saw value. Obviously, their needs are a little different. They were a little bit more hesitant about, you know, if they're in public safety, maybe meeting with somebody in another business org just because they may not understand their day-to-day job, but they still understood the value of coming together and intentionally problem solving.
So in terms of our group for our game, I think our biggest area of opportunities to understand what does it take in the back end, right? We were the kind of like the notification elves or trolls, if you will. And I think that's the most important component for us to dig deep into what does that look like. And we also referenced the idea of content generation. So this is something that we feel is very organic, and that's the area of possibility that in that component is the area that we could lose the most ground. If there's not enough community participation, then we potentially don't have any content generation.
Time that you were partnering with DFW, were there things that surprised you about the journey that you went on or the people that you met or the process itself?
I think for us, we were really surprised by the level of commitment and kind of transparency and activity that we saw from our participants. Not only the ones that we saw on the day of, but the ones that were really championing this for us, like in the days and weeks before. We actually, got a few sessions in with Janice and Suzanne from the learning development team. We got Jody on a few calls just, on a whim, and some of the other interviews that we had. I think it was just the level of commitment and like I think Ramisa said, the hunger for this type of activity around DFW really made it something that was almost easy on us.
Thank you. And I would build off what Ryan shared too. I think what surprised our team was just the power of having champions, people who would collaborate and be strong allies. I think something that every MADI student learns throughout their client experiences and partnerships is that you need to have a champion for your prototype, for the test, who will really be in many ways your ambassador in the room. I know for us, like Jason proved to be that champion. I think really every team found people within your organization who bought in and took time out of their work days just to make that viable for us. So I think that level of solidarity and excitement was a tremendous asset to our teams.
Yeah, I think we were really surprised by the in-depth responses that we received. Like the amount that DFW employees took, like we designed the activities to be like maybe 5 to 10 minutes, but they really spent time on providing these in-depth responses that really could be a great content bank for the innovation team and just DFW in general.
Yeah, actually we had a grateful chance to put our prototype to one of the airfield operation officer, and he was so busy when he was trying to fill out all the responses and questions, and we can hear him over the other side of the Zoom. He was like working on something else and he's talking to people, and at the same time he's so committed to help us with our prototype. But then the answer he come out as we show, he was saying something about how can we improve the intershift breathing, like the communication around that. And it just shows us there's so many different level of things that different employees from different department is concerned about. And without him, I feel like we will never have the chance to know deeper about, what's potential design challenge that DFW Airport employees might facing, like even down to a smaller thing like communications in departments, but instead we're thinking about something in a bigger scope. So we just believe that to make sure everyone's becoming more innovative and excited about it, it has to start with something small.
I guess just one more thing. The one thing that I probably can say for everyone else, the one thing that shocked us was just how many different types of jobs DFW Airport has. We were like, oh, they must be contractors. And we learned very quickly, no, those are actual employees. So we're like, they're in scope too. We interviewed somebody who's from the bomb squad and we were like, wow, you're a DFW Airport employee also. So I think that obviously that also created an area of opportunity, but that was something that we learned. I also tell all of my friends now that DFW Airport is the size of Manhattan. So everyone is learning that as well.
Okay, so it seems like, do we have any more questions? Okay, it seems like they should be done now, but they're not. They still have a full paper to write that will be delivered to Jody and her team and everyone else who wants access to it, as well as any kind of deliverables that they created, like the brain date menus, any other stickers or anything else that they produced. I just want to really commend this team. We started out with this very huge, we're going to work with the airport, and everyone's like, the airport, like what? So it was just, again, a great opportunity. Thank you, Paul and Jody, to like really connect us and make this happen. But you guys did it. You did an excellent job, and I'm excited for that. I think that Ramisa mentioned this, but we also wouldn't have done this at all without Justin Childress, who co-taught with me, and Amanda Austin, who is our designer in resident. And so, yes. We have the great privilege to teach the class. So Justin and I come in as kind of design process, human-centered design process experts. And then we always partner with someone who's more content expert. So Amanda is director of people and culture at Dialexa. And so it's been great to just get her insight on how it works with people and how do we kind of run together. So thank you to you both. And thank you to Jody. And so we're done for the day. And thank you to everyone who joined us online. And we'll talk to you soon, I guess.
Again, I want to iterate, you guys did a great job, and I so appreciate you involving our people, which is so critically important to the design process, as you all know, but you also demonstrated to them how powerful that can be as we think about new opportunities. And I will sort of give everyone a heads up. We do have some of these ideas baked into our goals for 2022. So you heard it here first. We're super excited. We may follow up with you. We're looking forward to it. So thank you again to all of you, and to all of you in the audience and on Zoom for participating with the spirit that you did, because the cross-functional nature is just so critically important to how we do this going forward. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah.